Welcome to the first LEGO League Challenge Tournament Director Training for Arizona qualifying tournaments. My name is Rick, and I will be sharing information about how I manage my tournaments. Let's get started. The objective for this training is basically provide a high-level guide to new and experienced tournament directors. We can always learn something new from each other. I'd like to offer some best practices that I've developed over the years that seem to lead to successful qualifier tournaments. Through this, I'm going to try and share experiences that I have encountered at my tournaments to try and help others have awareness of what can happen and possibly if you can avoid them. So a little about myself. In 2013, I earned my Bachelor of Science in Engineering in Aerospace Engineering from ASU. And then since 2015, I am a reliability and system safety engineer for an aerospace company here in the Valley. My experience with FIRST dates back to high school. My senior year, I was on the FIRST robotics competition team. For anybody familiar with the seasons, that was FIRST Overdrive, a large red ball that you had to move around the court. And then since 2009, I've been volunteering at FIRST LEGO League Challenge events. Since ASU Engineering runs FIRST LEGO League Challenge in Arizona, they sent out an email blast looking for volunteers. And since I was familiar with the FIRST organization, I thought I would try helping out, and I've been doing it ever since. Then starting in 2014, I was asked to be a tournament director for an event at the ASU Polytechnic campus. And ever since then, I've been doing qualifier tournaments. And then in the past 2 years, I am now the tournament director for the Arizona State Championship. So I've done 14 events across 9 seasons and advised and supported a few other tournament directors. So what is the tournament director role? So the mission of a tournament director, as I see it, is to ensure that everyone is prepared to have a fantastic event day. And how do we get to that mission completion? Preparation, organization, and communication. Most of our work occurs in the weeks leading up to the event day. So by event day, we should be able to walk around, monitor our volunteers, help them as they need help, and interact with the teams. But be aware that at a moment's notice, you may need to solve a problem or rearrange the original plan. So high-level preparations overview. This is the breakdown for the presentation. We're going to look at the event venue. This is important because you need to determine how the event is going to be laid out, what you have to work with, how you're going to fit everything in there. The event schedule. For those not familiar, FIRST LEGO League Challenge events are very scripted on time, and you're basically trying to get each team to have 4 times playing the robot game and 1 time for their judging session. We'll go through supplies, definitely robot game tables. Judges need certain resources, referees need resources. There's printed materials, and then there's general office supplies like paper, pens, pencils, sticky notes, paper clips. Teams. Our job is to make sure that the teams who register for the event know when the event is and are able to show up and compete. And finally, volunteers. These events, depending on the number of teams, are large and need many other volunteers to help run the event. So let's get started with the event venue. What do you need for the event venue? At a minimum, a qualifying tournament needs the following areas. Somewhere to have the robot game competition and audience seating so they can spectate it. Team pits, which are basically their home base for the day. They bring extra spare parts, laptop computers, snacks, all sorts of equipment to make them compete for the day. Judging pods, these are basically separate rooms, kind of off to the side from the main other areas. A volunteer hospitality room, a judge deliberations room, and an important note, depending on the size of your tournament, will depend on the size of some of these areas. Yes. All right, so the event venue, know the space. For a first-time tournament director, or if you're starting at a new location, you should definitely walk through the facility and review the available spaces. Ideally, this is at least a month ahead of the event date. Sooner the better, allows you to plan and figure out if you need to adjust plans. Ask for a map of the venue if one is available, or make notes about where the areas are located. Things like specific room numbers, where restrooms are, the general size of areas. For example, will where you want to put the team pits fit 10 teams or 20 teams? General distances between areas. Is it a long walk between the pits and the judging? As you develop your schedule, you want to make sure that teams have enough time to get from one area to the other. And a recommendation, take photos if you're allowed to, and or make notes about what you see so that you can remember this once you get back home later to do your planning. All right, here's some examples of event locations I have worked at. This one up here is basically just a gymnasium. For a location like this, you'll have to think about bringing in chairs so that the audience has somewhere to sit. And then, of course, at the front are the robot game tables, a queuing area. I don't remember, but we may have had pits in here or they're in a different area. Another location, this is at Arizona State University Polytechnic campus. They have a large auditorium lecture type hall, and we were able to utilize that. That was nice because you don't have to worry about seating. And then on the stage was where we put the actual competition tables. And another school gym. They had chairs available, so you just set those up, and then so that spectators can view the competition. Uh, School cafeterias work well as pits and or entire event spaces. You can move the tables around and these become the pits. Chairs can be lined up to be spectating areas. Classrooms work well for judging. Just remember what it looks like before you start rearranging, and then have your event, and then at the end put it back so that the school didn't know you were there. All right, event venue navigation. So basically, how easy will it be for teams to find where they are going? Some venues are more spread out than others. Some are all together, some aren't. Where will the teams park? Is there any concern about normal automobiles versus buses? Some teams will come in a small school bus. Is there a parking space for that? And then once they park, how do they get to the tournament area? Is it right nearby, or do you need uh, signs to help navigate them through a campus? I recommend creating an annotated map of the venue and pointing out key points. And if you do that, send that to the teams prior to the event day so that they know where they're going. Here's an example again at ASU Polytech. Uh, the campus is very large, so I pulled down the publicly available map, and then on top of it added color boxes for the various buildings using the names they would find on campus, and then also provided what was going on in each of the areas. So for example, lot 30 was where we were parking. Peralta Hall was where judging rooms would be. The Aravaipa Auditorium was for the robot game and closing ceremony. Santan Hall had classrooms that were being used as the team pits. And then the Union was a food court in case teams wanted to purchase food from the vendors in there. Which brings me to other thoughts. Food. It'll be a long day, so teams will need to eat at some point. Depending on the venue that you're using, they may or may not allow food within certain areas of the facility. Just be aware of this and make sure that there will be somewhere that teams can take their lunch break at. Recommend what food locations are nearby. Some teams bring a brown bag lunch with them. Other teams may have a parent go out and bring back food for the team. Uh, if a tournament is being run by at a high school by one of the high school robotic teams, maybe they can use this as a fundraiser to sell pizzas or snacks or drinks. I just recommend planning that ahead and providing information to the teams that it'll be an option, depending on if you want to take cash only or for payment options, so that the teams are aware of that. Lighting. This was a unique situation that I had early on. Received some feedback from teams that the lighting was affecting the sensors on some of the team's designs. On the stage, there were stage lights, but having them up too high, A, would make the stage hot, and B, I was using a back projected screen. So too many lights would wash out the scoreboard and the live feed. So the solution was get some PVC from Home Depot, build a stand, and hang a bar light down the center of the table so that there was bright light on top of the tables. I've only encountered this once, but thought maybe somebody would like to know that this could be a problem and to look for this as you're doing your venue reviews. Another thought is power sources in the pits. Are there any powers in the pits? The teams will be bringing in laptops, may need to charge their robot batteries. Ideally, having power at the actual pit tables or having charging tables around the pits. Be aware that some teams will bring extension cords to bring power from a power outlet directly over to their table. Sometimes venues will have a requirement not allowing that. Other times, as long as it's done in a safe manner, such as not having a coil like up above the ground posing a trip hazard, that may be okay. Just something to be aware of. How about robot game projection? Usually the audience is sitting at the same level as the robot tables, and thus you can't really see what's going on. A nice to have is the ability to project the game table action uh, for the audience to see as it's happening. There are various ways to do this. I recommend being creative. A great project for the high school team, they might also have a design already. Um, Webcams can be used if they're mounted near and over the tables. There's free software OBS Studio that will take the webcam feed and allow you to, if you have multiple webcams for each table running, you can easily switch between which one is active. I had done a solution using a Raspberry Pi and a software package that was for security cameras to provide a live view to the audience. The nice thing about that, I was using a wireless network um, to get the data from the cameras to the computer presenting. It could have been completely wireless. I used a power cord, but using a battery pack, it probably could have been completely wireless, and that just makes setting up easier. All right, event schedule now. So what is required for a first leg of the qualifier? Basically, every team will have one practice match, which is 2.5 minutes. They will then have 3 robot game official matches, again 2.5 minutes per match, and 1 judging session, which is 30 minutes. Now the fun challenge for us as tournament director is creating a schedule that fits in all these requirements, bounces time, so that they're not running around too crazily, but minimizes the time for the tournament to complete. You don't want stuff stacked on top of each other too much, because then that will make it go. Um, if you have a complication, it tends to snowball. But if it's too long, then everybody gets tired. So it's a balance of getting everything just right. So overview. What should you consider while developing the schedule? Well, like I mentioned earlier, FLL events are highly scripted to a time-based schedule. The teams that are coming to your qualifier will have varying levels of experience. Sometimes this will be their first qualifier. Sometimes this might be their second or third. So they already know how it works. My recommendations: allow as much time between a team's scheduled events as possible. Have developed the practice matches with larger gaps between the rounds. This allows both your volunteers and your teams to learn how the process works and do it in a slightly calmer fashion and get all the kinks out. And then for the official round, you can speed up the in-between now. I also recommend between the practice and the official matches to allowing a bit of a gap. 10 minutes or so should do well. This allows for either A, break time for the volunteers, and or B, time to catch up if the practice rounds run behind. Since everything is going on simultaneously, judging and robot games, if the robot games start to get behind, you can start to have teams having to skip the robot match and go to judging. And then that just kind of throws everything off. So if you can schedule it in a way where you can use some time to catch back up to the published schedule, I find that that is a great benefit to everyone. So as you develop the schedule, what are your constraints? The number of teams attending, the number of robot tables that you are going to use. A robot game is 2.5 minutes plus some time before and after for setup, before the run, and then scoring after the run. So the number of game tables define the number of robot matches that can occur in a given period of time. Similarly, the judging pods, again, defines how many judging sessions can occur at one time. Each team is in the judging room for 30 minutes. Then it's recommended to have a 15-minute time for the judges to finish their notes before the next team joins. So realistically, you can only, if you have 5 rooms, you're basically going to get through 5 teams in an hour. So if you have 10 teams, you'll need 90 minutes to fully get through those teams. The robot game also needs to be complete before the judge deliberation can begin. This has been a change in more recent years. You could keep the game going as the judges started, but now we need judge deliberation to be complete. And for that judge deliberation, bookmark about an hour and a half. This depends on how many teams are at the event. Smaller number of teams, the judges will most likely be able to deliberate more quickly, whereas larger events may need more time. But 1.5 hours is a good baseline. So since I've been a tournament director, I've been using a scheduling spreadsheet. Basically, you're able to specify some event parameters, and then it runs a macro to generate a schedule and randomly assigns teams to the schedule slots. I find that it's a powerful tool, but there are some limitations that, if you're unaware of what it's doing, can be frustrating to the first time user. But of course, there are other resources for creating schedules. And ideally, I'm working on a Windows application, which one day may be available. But I'm behind. So what are the benefits? The output side gives, are multiple tabs. There's a graphical schedule. Basically, it provides a box for each session and the team number so that you can see how your day is laid out. Match schedules, a textual list of the official and practice rounds by time, table, and team numbers. Judge schedules, similar to the other one, a textual base list. Scheduled by team number, a complete list of the teams and then their associated robot matches and judging sessions. Another graphical schedule that provides more of a view to see if any teams have really short periods between events. And finally, the MC match schedules. Similar to the match schedules above, but this one provides the team name and number of the two teams on a table at each given time, instead of having to look those up from a separate list. Now we'll go through what some of the inputs look like on this scheduling tool. This is for the general information about the tournament. You can provide a tournament name, some breaks that interrupt the entire tournament, a minimum amount of buffer time that teams have in between the events, and then the number of teams that are competing. Registration and coaches meeting, they're really not important. I just include them so that I have a visual for keeping track of how I want stuff laid out. I have found that at qualifying tournaments, having a lunch break built in makes it easier. All your volunteers can eat at that time. All your teams can eat at that time. Sometimes at the larger events, we need to stagger volunteers due to space. And if when you go to run the scheduler and it fails to generate a schedule, I would recommend coming back here to this buffer time, setting that down to 0 or 1 minute. Once it runs, you can see the visual representation of your schedule and start going back and tweaking this to see what works and then if you need to tweak other things. But I find that if it's not working, go back, set this to like 1 minute, see if it works, and then adjust from there. All right, so the practice round inputs. You may, at a qualifier tournament, definitely have one practice round. Everybody will be new there. Specify when you want it to start, how many tables. So these are the the pair of robot game tables. In this case, my tournament is using 3. Matches per time slot. This you can have multiple tables running at the same time. I recommend for most tournaments I've run, I'll have 2 full tables running one at a time. Practice match duration minimum. This is 2.5 minutes. Anytime above that allows more time at the table for setup. You can also build that in with the cleanup or buffer time, but I generally have the match duration larger, and we'll see on following slides how this time also becomes the buffer time for that team to be there. If you need a specific break in the schedule, you can apply it and it'll only affect the robot game rounds. Again, I generally make practice rounds have a larger period since everybody is learning the process at this time. Here's the official round inputs. The start of the official round. On the practice round, it will also tell you when that ends. So I generally take that time, add about 10 minutes, and that's set as my first official round start. How many full tables, basically that's probably going to be the same as your practice rounds. Official round, I went from, as you see, I went from 4 down to 3. As I mentioned, I recommend having a break in between. Gives volunteers a rest period, or you can catch back up to the scheduled times of the schedule if practice rounds start taking longer. All right, judging sessions. This starting time does not have to go with the robot matches. Basically, just the number of rooms that you have set. The length in minutes that the team will be in there with the judges is 30 minutes. And then it's recommended to have a 15-minute time before the next team goes in so that the judges can do their notes of what they just saw. And since judging sessions are now 30 minutes, this is a major constraint as you're laying out your schedule. And we'll see that on the next screen, how it can be impactful. This is the graphical schedule by time tab when you run a schedule. Note the blue practice and green round one boxes I add manually just as visuals for myself. But as you see, it has an official round section, a practice round section, and the judging sessions, with the vertical lanes being the various judging rooms and the sides of each table. So for um, the size of the block is the 4 minutes, and then since we didn't have them running simultaneously, as that 4 minutes ends, it moves to the next one to start another 4 minutes. In doing that, you really have 8 minutes before the next teams start on this table. So although it looks like you only have 4 minutes at the table, you do have 8 minutes before the next team comes. So the referees will finish their scoring, table can be reset, and then the next two teams can come get set up before the match is to start at, say, 9:22. This 8 minutes is due to a 3 table setup. If you had just 2, then you'd have 4 minutes, which should be enough time, or you may want to add that extra gap in there or make your schedule match time larger. And here's a key that if you are scheduling for a small tournament and when you try to run your schedule, it routinely fails and does not converge to a solution. The issue is, depending on the number of judging sessions and how the rounds run, you may be able to get through all your teams within 30 minutes. Now, if all the teams can run their robot matches within 30 minutes, that means any teams that are in judging can never get to a robot round. So the solution to allow your schedule to work is to extend the time of the practice rounds until you can see this visual, and then you can tweak it and make it work better. But the way the Excel spreadsheet runs, it just says that it fails. It doesn't give any information as to why it's failing. All right, here's the example of the output for the match schedules of the robot rounds, the judge schedules, and the MC schedule. As you see, the MC and the match schedules are similar, except it includes both the team name and the team number, whereas the other schedules will only provide the team number. So I would provide an official rounds, the match schedule to my queuing team so that they know what team numbers to be calling out and finding. Whereas the MC wants to know what the team name is so that they can announce it to the audience as the team is getting set up. And this schedule has that on there for them. Here's the output example for the schedule by team number. Basically, you've got all the teams and then it lists out their first match, second, third, their practice, and their judging. You can provide this as is to the teams, or what I'd like to do now is take this, put it through basically a mail merge, and provide them a nice individual sheet. And then you can provide other information to the teams as well. I'll highlight this is probably something I wouldn't provide to the teams, but this is the minimum time in minutes that a team would have between any two of their sessions. This can be nice for troubleshooting to see if you've got any teams with really short times between their events. You'll see for this example early on, I had an 8-minute minimum, and you'll see that this team, the schedule did set that or only find a solution of 8 minutes. But most of the time, most of the teams have minimums of greater than that. So here's an example of the team printout that I was alluding to. What I like about it is that I can provide other information to the teams in addition to the schedule information. You can also, if you're doing a live stream, you can provide the live stream URL and or a QR code to this sheet of paper. I've also experimented with if a team has one of the first practice rounds or the first judging session, I'll put a note at the bottom identifying as such. I think it's a nice to have for teams. It's not required. It's an extra step. And to print out this sheet versus a global one for everybody. But it's fairly easy to make. You basically create the layout in Word as a mail merge, and then tie that to a spreadsheet with all the information, and then it spits out a single page for every team. So that's the main part of the scheduling tool. But as you're doing your event schedule, also remember that you're going to need that 1.5 hours for judge deliberations after judging and robot matches are complete. So it's a good idea to have something planned to keep the teams entertained during this time. Some ideas, you could have them come up and do a run for fun one more time. Ask any teams if they would like to share their presentations in front of a larger audience, or come up with a small new challenge using some of the mission models. Present simple rules and something that the teams can do quickly, but also remember, don't damage the mission models because those will need to be used at another qualifier. Finally, once the judges are finished deliberation, you'll hold the closing ceremony. Closing ceremony, I generally book about 30 minutes for that. That will depend on the number and the size of the teams, though. All right, let's talk about teams. Teams. Do they appear magically? To us, kind of. So the first program delivery partner here in Arizona, it's Elaine in the Arizona State University Engineering Education Outreach Department, handles the management of team registration. That is all transparent to us. And then as teams register and the tournament date approaches, we receive a list of teams who signed up for the qualifier tournament from the ASU team. All right, so what do we do with the list when we receive it? Well, basically, that's information that we can used for two main purposes: finalize the event schedule with the team numbers and allow us to communicate with the coaches of those registered teams so that we can provide all the information they need, like when the event starts, confirm the location, um, answer any questions they may have about the event, etc. A key point to remember is when emailing teams, use the blind carbon copy line in your email so that the emails of each coach is hidden from the other coaches. So providing basic information. The teams will be eager to hear from us as the tournament director once they've registered and are confirmed for a certain qualifier. Generally, I will send a email to them about 2 weeks ahead of the qualifier date. I introduce myself so they know who they can contact with questions. I provide tentative event schedule, mainly the start and end times. A lot of times they may need to arrange transportation with the school, things like that, and they'll need the start and a estimate for the end times. I reiterate the event location and address, and then I provide my contact information. Uh, Basically, it's just my email at this stage. Later on, I will provide more detailed information. Generally, it is the Sunday before the event. Again, I'll provide the event address and any special directions if they're necessary. A summary of how the check-in process will go when they arrive. A more detailed event schedule of when specific event sections will begin, like the coaches meeting, start of judging sessions, start of robot practice matches, closing ceremony, end of the day, stuff like that. General notes about what to expect at the event. This is mainly to help rookie teams who may not have any idea of how the day is going to go. What time lunch is planned to be, and then any information about lunch, like locations nearby. Um, any other announcements? Sometimes you're still looking for additional volunteers. You may ask um, if there are anybody at the other schools, parents, friends who could help volunteer. And then I'd like to ask them to reply to the email and confirm their team name. Why do I do this? When a team first registers, they'll put in a team name. Sometimes after that original registration, the students will come up with a new name that they want to use, but that's not always flowed back to the registration system and down to us as tournament directors. So if we use the name that comes to us from registration, that's what's put in the information, and that's how the volunteers will be addressing them. Ideally, I like to make sure that we have the most up-to-date name so that the teams and the volunteers will be saying and listening for the proper name. And lastly, again, my contact information, but this time I include my mobile phone number. That's useful if the teams are having trouble finding the venue on event day. Event schedule. Usually the Thursday evening before the event, I will send out one final email to each team with their individual schedule. That sheet that I showed earlier. For smaller tournaments, you can brute force this by manually creating and sending separate emails to each team. Or for larger events, I have found that the Microsoft Power Automate tool can be set up to connect to your Microsoft email and send a general body, and then you can have that customized to team names by connecting it to a spreadsheet. You can also add various attachments, either a general one to everybody or a specific one. Um, if anybody's more interested in this, I can put together more information, but I learned it from some videos online. But I have found that it's an interesting tool. My recommendation that if you are going to send out the event schedule ahead of time, to include a small watermark version number or date in the footer of the document. This is so that if after you send it, you have to revise the schedule, you'll be able to identify the correct one on event day. Sometimes there might be a last minute change because you need to fit in just one more team who wants to join your tournament. Um, Sometimes you may have an extra gap in the tournament schedule and there's no problem. You just create a new sheet for that team and you're good. Other times you may have to rerun the entire schedule to fit them in, and thus what you previously sent out now does not work. Uh, Miscellaneous information with teams. You'll likely receive questions from them following some of your emails. Depending on the type of questions, I either just answer that individual coach. Well, I will answer that individual coach, but I may also include the question and answer in my next email to all of the teams if it was obvious that I missed something important for everybody. Does your venue require additional waivers? If so, make sure that you send those out to coaches with enough time so that the coach receives the email, is able to either print or forward it to the parents, have the parents sign them, and then return them, have their student return it to the coach to come to the event. I don't believe this happens often, but this is another thing where you need some planning ahead of time and you don't want to last minute this type of thing. All right, let's talk about some supplies. A lot of stuff is necessary to have a successful event. Luckily, other than the robot game tables, nothing is necessarily special. It's basically all office supply store type items. But you want you want to understand what you need and have enough on hand so that your tournament runs smoothly. My recommendation is kind of break your supply planning into areas so that you know what needs to go where when you get to the venue to set up. Here's some examples of what is needed. Um, like I said, I've broken it up so this slide is for robot competition, and then you've got kind of sub areas of who is working in the robot competition area. Judging, the judging pod, and the judge advisor slash for deliberations of different supply needs. And then miscellaneous, team pits, volunteers, and then other catch-all. A note, if your venue is large, you may want two-way radios. They can be useful for the tournament director to reach um, the scorekeeper if there's an issue, or the judge advisor if they have an issue. Two-way radios are also helpful for communication between the queuing team and a pit administrator for making announcements. but they're by no means required. You can definitely have an event without radios. Similarly, having access to a copier printer can be helpful in case there are last minute uh, changes need to be made or flowed out to teams in a paper copy. Again, I generally do not need this, but it is helpful knowing that it's there. List of documents. Uh, General items that I produce for an event. You'll need some type of way to know what teams are checking in. Sometimes have extras of forms. The coach mentor nomination sheet, one per team, each team will submit that to the judges. Uh, Notification of who your volunteers are, schedules and maps, judge materials so they know for reference. Um, and volunteers. So no event happens without volunteers. They are truly the heart of the event. So part of planning is to identify how many volunteers do you need. Certain roles have a minimum based on the event size and configuration. Basically referees, you need a head referee and one referee per robot game table. Judges, 3 judges minimum per judging pod. And then other roles are nice to have more of, but can be done with fewer. Queuers, I would recommend a minimum of 2. If you have more, it just allows more flexibility for tracking down teams. Scorekeepers, uh, a small medium event can probably use 1. As you get into larger events, you'll want more so that scores are input quicker and show up on the scoreboard quicker. And basically, a properly staffed event allows for a more smoothly running event. And your core team will be tournament director, head referee, judge advisor, and volunteer coordinator. These are basically the people who oversee all the major aspects of the event for both planning and implementation on event day. So identify these early in the event planning process. Although for a lot of tournaments that I've run, I kind of become the volunteer coordinator as well. Sometimes your judge, advisor, and head referee may be assigned at the event and they can help manage who they know are good judges and referees. All depends on the size of the event, how many people you have access to help volunteer. Here's a list of the roles and recommended quantity that I find work. These event roles are in the volunteer management system. I have a little bit on that in coming up slides. Um, but basically, it's a set of roles for events. You don't have to use them. Basically, you can set to hide it, and then a volunteer can't apply for that role. And you can create specific role names if you want. Right, so the volunteer management system, or VMS, it is a first provided tool for managing volunteers who register for the event. Um, it takes care of the youth protection requirements and that they have training completed, and enables the volunteer coordinator or you as tournament director to configure the roles that we want for the event. As I mentioned, all those preloaded roles or custom roles, and to assign volunteers to the event roles, and then email them so that they know that they have a role at the event. And again, it won't allow you to assign a volunteer until they pass the youth protection screening. Um, Generally, they know to do it themselves. Sometimes I'll send an email to the applicant to remind them that they need to go back into their dashboard and complete the screening. Training. Some roles require more training than others. VMS should provide them a link to training if it's required for their role. This is mostly important for the referees and judges, since their roles are more, need to understand what's going on ahead of time. In Arizona, the head referee and the judge advisor generally have virtual training sessions in the weeks leading up to the start of qualifying tournaments. And these are to help calibrate all the volunteers so that we have a consistent experience across the state. A short recommendation, I would have notes for how certain roles operate. There have been times where I expected that I would brief the volunteers on how they do their role, but I became busy troubleshooting something else and wasn't able to provide the briefing I was hoping to do. So, for example, for the check-in table, have a list of what needs to be collected from a team versus a volunteer. Let them know where to direct volunteers to the hospitality room, etc. And then for robot match queuing, explain how the queuing process works so that the schedule moves smoothly. Food for, don't forget to plan to feed your volunteers lunch. Pizza is always an option, or if you have other ideas, sometimes make your own sandwich type items. Light breakfast items are generally appreciated too, if the budget can allow. And there should be a stipend available for each qualifier, but those details will be provided by Elaine later on. A lot of the times, if you can order it online, the ASU team can pay for it directly. Lastly, with our volunteers, we need to provide the event information. Generally, the week of the event is when I will send an email to all of the volunteers with the event specifics. A lot of the information is similar to what I sent to teams, just with slight variation. Information such as the location and address and where to park, the high-level event schedule, start times, ending time, the specific session start times, what the arrival time and procedures we'll look at. Volunteers such as judges and referees, they usually have a meeting with their lead that starts at a certain time. So we want to make sure that those groups of volunteers are on site and ready to do their meetings. Other volunteers such as queuers are nice to have as long as they're there ahead of the start of the robot matches with enough time to learn what their process is going to be. I inform them and make sure they're aware that they will be provided a lunch so they don't have to worry about that. And lastly, I provide my contact information similar to the team's email and mobile phone number. And like when communicating with teams, remember to use the blind carbon copy line when sending your emails so that everybody does not see everybody else's email address. All right, tools and resources. So my recommendations have an organized folder structure for storing files. I like to use Microsoft OneNote to keep track of random notes and information all housed in a single location. And then over time, I have developed a spreadsheet for organizing all the aspects of the event. Basically, like my event venue details, like the rooms that are reserved and what I'm going to use a room for, my supply list and counts of items on that supply list, the document list and how many copies need to be made, the summary of volunteer information from the VMS system so I know, do I have all the referees that are needed? Do I have all the judges that are needed, other roles, etc.? And then the team contact information uh, from the ASU team of who will be attending the event. And a key point here is make sure to password protect that file once the sensitive contact information is added. And then also a recommendation is as you're developing your event and files, think about how can I reuse this for next season? Your first tournament will be the hardest to plan for because you don't have anything for it. But your next one will likely benefit from copy and pasting just to do updates for the new season. General resources. Elaine usually makes a Google Drive folder with various resources to help us create the event. Um, all the first supplied judging rubrics and the scoring software or score sheets, all that type of information. These first websites also have useful information for us as tournament directors. All right, so the Event Hub. It's a online portal created by First. And basically it allows a central location for event results to be posted for teams to retrieve after the event. So the robot game score sheets will be in there, as well as judging rubrics. And the judge advisor during deliberation also enters the teams who won awards and advance to the next competition. So pre-event preparation, basically you're going to want to enter the teams registered for the event into the system and invite the registered coaches. Then create a single robot game table and assign all the teams to it. For each team, the system should show they have a practice and 3 official rounds. And then create the same number of judging pods as what you developed in your schedule. And per the schedule, use the drop down to assign the teams to their judging pods. And then likely your judge advisor will invite the specific judges to the event hub and assign them to their judging pods. Recommendation, do not use the auto assign feature because it will not match your schedule that you made outside of Event Hub. And a little back to the single robot game table. It's easier to just have a single table for instead of assigning teams to a certain table, because if the schedule starts to misalign, you don't care who is playing on what table because they're all just in a single list. So then on event day, depending on the technology available, you may have tablets for each referee so they can score the teams directly in Event Hub. Otherwise, the referees can score teams on a paper score sheet, and then the scorekeeper can enter it into Event Hub for the score. My recommendation is that if you use the paper score sheet, have your scorekeeper write that calculated numerical score onto the paper just as a backup. Also, have the Excel spreadsheet score calculator ready, again, as a backup in case your network has issues. On the judging side, they'll generally take notes on the paper rubrics while the team is presenting. And then during that 15 minutes between the teams, as they're finalizing their thoughts, one of the judges will consolidate all the information and input it into the Event Hub system. And personally, as much as I like technology, for events, I like having paper because it is a backup in case the network becomes unavailable or in case something gets corrupted with the computer systems. Post-event with the Event Hub, once it's complete, there will be a button in there for you to click to finalize the event. Once that's finalized, the teams can go in and see their individual results. And with that, our planning is complete and it's time for event day. Setup. It's highly recommended to set everything up Friday night before, but make sure that you discuss this with your event venue. For example, school events, sometimes they are occurring in your cafeteria or gym area on Friday nights. And you'll just want to make sure you're aware of that and have a plan to maybe set up what you can off to the side and then move it into the area quickly Saturday morning. Not ideal, but we work with what we need. Don't forget to recruit people to help set up however you see fit. For setup, a recommendation, have copies of like a written plan of what needs to be set up in the various areas. The helpers might not know what this event is, and if you have it written out, it's quicker to know or to assign jobs to people. And I like having everything set up Friday night because in the morning there's always some type of last minute thing that needs to be finished that is going to require your attention to resolve it. And just the fewer things that you know you have to do allows for those unexpected things. So the coaches meeting, basically you're reiterating all the details and any specifics of the day, go through site rules. I like to mention that although today is exciting, remind the students to walk, especially going through doorways. As we know, robots are fragile, and if you drop it, there will be Legos all over the floor. Provide guidance about restricted areas. Maybe you're at a school with multiple levels, but all your rooms and locations are on ground level. So say nobody should be on the second floor. Go through the site map, point out where the restrooms are, how to get to judging pods, etc. Provide the high-level schedule overview. Remind teams, especially if they're rookies, the event is highly scheduled and recommend them to arrive to their next session ahead of time and also that judging sessions have priority over the robot game. It is impossible to make up that 30-minute session, whereas it's very easy to make up the 2.5-minute session. So if the times start to deviate from the schedule, sometimes a team will have to go to a judging session and then come back to a robot game later. Just make sure that they're aware of that. Closing ceremony agenda, kind of brief explanation about how it's going to work. Ask them to have students along the edges. Robot game notes. Remind the teams that once the sheet is signed, it is final. Your judge advisor is most likely doing their morning briefing with their judges. So ahead of time, I ask them if they have any notes they want the teams to know, and then I present those to the coaches. Describe how the advancement is going to work. Generally, I have the head referee speak to the coaches about game rule updates or what they're looking for or have found to be issues. And then finally Q&A with the coaches. And after that, I'll invite one coach per team to come and inspect the robot game tables, because after that, everything is up to the students to point out to the referees if they don't agree or believe that the table is set up properly. Opening ceremony, you have an option of having an opening ceremony. Generally, I skip this so that we have the most time on the scheduled events as possible and allows for a shorter day. So now the schedule is running. And once it gets underway, you can step back and your volunteers will own the show. Basically just walk around, ensure they have what they need, troubleshoot any issues that may arise, such as the schedule running behind, restrooms are flooding, computer systems have failed, fire alarm is going off. Yes, I have had all 4 of those happen. Not at the same events, but various times. And then enjoy interacting with the coaches and teams. The teams are excited to share what they've been working on. As the event is winding down, it's time to prepare for the closing ceremony. So prior to judges finishing their deliberation, you can start packing up the robot competition tables. Note, please do that gently and orderly because they will most likely be used by a tournament next weekend. And then as you clear off that area, you can set up a table and display the trophies, put out some medals, make a nice little display of what will be handed out shortly. And then after the judges finish their deliberation, this is the time where you can announce that the closing ceremony is about to start and have all the teams and coaches come into the ceremony area. Again, I recommend having team members sit along the edges so that they can easily access walkways so that they come to the front and get their medals or trophies. And then invite all your volunteers to form a line across the front of the ceremony area and have clusters of medals handed out to each volunteer. The closing ceremony. Congratulate the teams on their performance today. They worked really hard for the past couple of months, and then they showed off what they could do today. And as part of this, invite each team across the stage to receive their medals. After the medals, you'll go through the list of awards that the judges decided on, go through the award description, the judge hints they wrote, and then finally announce what the winning team number and name is. And then that team will come up, walk across the stage, and receive their trophy. And lastly, announce the teams who have qualified and advanced to the Arizona State Championship tournament. And after all that's done, close out the event day and wish all the teams and volunteers a safe trip home. Which takes us to cleanup. A good idea is as event areas are no longer needed, you can start cleaning and packing those areas up. So, for example, are the judges deliberating now? You can clean up and reset the judging pods back to their original conditions. Are the robot matches complete? You can probably pick up the practice tables and the competition tables. Teams can start packing up their stuff. But of course, some areas have to wait until the very end, and ideally, it will appear like the event never happened. So congratulations, you made it through your first LEGO League Challenge qualifier tournament. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions.